back to Musicians Edition. Today we're going to talk about setting yourself up at the drum set, okay? In our last video, we went over setting up your own drums and getting them all assembled and put together. And now, today we're going to talk about how we position ourselves at the drums so that we can play most effectively, all right? One of the key components of this is our throne, right? Now, we talked about thrones in the parts of the drum set video, right? It's important that you pick a throne that is going to be height adjustable to however tall or short or however long or short your legs are, right? Because it's very important that when we sit behind the drums that we're comfortable, right? Not only because it's just unpleasant to be uncomfortable, but also because we're going to be spending a lot of time back here, and you don't want to be walking away from the drums with sore knees or sore back, right? And a lot of times we can take care of some of that, like fatigue and soreness, by just making sure that we're set up in the most advantageous way, okay? So you want to just adjust the height of your throne, right? Many of them have a screw, and then you can raise them up and then screw them back in, right? This one that I have here has a little lever, and it raises and lowers hydraulically. I'll show you that real quick, right? So I just pull on this, and it comes up. If I pull on it and push down, it goes down, okay? So when we sit down, we want to try to have our like knees and our hips somewhat even, right? We don't want to be sitting real far down because that kind of puts our knees and our hips in an awkward position to be able to work the pedals effectively, right? I also find that sitting up too high kind of feels a little bit funny in my knees and ankles as well. Again, it's all about kind of playing around with it, adjusting, and finding what works best for you. But kind of starting with your knees and your hips on a somewhat level plane will get you going, okay? Kind of like we mentioned in the last video, we want to place our feet kind of sort of equidistant from our body, right? So we want our right foot to be coming out about the same distance that our left foot is coming out, okay? When we place our right foot on the bass drum pedal, we want to typically cover all of the foot plate, or at least most of it, right? We don't want to be way back in the back here. Again, some drummers do play this way, and that's something that you can develop over time, right? But as a starting point, we want to kind of come all the way up to where our footprint is kind of covering all of the plate on that pedal, okay? Now, with the right foot, I like to start with my heel down, right? And I tell my students to start with their heel down. You'll see a lot of drummers play with their heel up, lifted, and that works great for a lot of people. I play that way sometimes too, but just as a general place to get going, heel down tends to be the most comfortable and the easiest to control. Then, you know, down the road, if you want to mess around with some heel up stuff, that's totally cool as well, okay? Hi-hat is a very similar drill with the other foot. We want to kind of cover that whole plate, like with our footprint, right? Now, with the hi-hat, I like to put a little more weight in the front side of my foot, even raise my heel up a good amount of the time, just because it kind of squeezes the cymbals together a little more tightly, and I prefer that sound, okay? But you can just think about putting both your feet down, just nice and comfortable, starting out, and then we can make those little adjustments as we go along, okay? So that's the seat, that's the pedal placement, right? Now let's talk about our hands, okay? So when we approach the drum set, we want to try to space ourselves the same way we would when we're playing a snare drum standing up, right? Or a practice pad standing up, right? So you don't want it to be completely different from that context, right? So you don't want it real close in or real far away, right? Or at an angle that's different from what you're used to. Just start with making it comfortable, right? Just like we've been working with on the practice pad, okay? The hi-hat it tends to be elevated a little bit over the snare drum, maybe half a drumstick or so, something like that. Again, some people play them with them way up high. Some people play them with their hi-hats way down low. Again, that's totally cool. And those might be some options that you want to experiment with down the road. But for the time being, just to get going, think about 6 inches above your snare drum, right? And then just place it in such a way that when you're playing snare drum with both hands, your hi-hat's not in the way, right? But it's also in a comfortable position for your foot, right? So there's a couple things to consider there, all right? So when we're playing both hands on the snare drum, again, it works just like the practice pad. A lot of the times when we're playing patterns with all three of our limbs here, our right hand, our left hand, and our right foot, we'll be playing the hi-hat with one of our hands, right? The way that we're going to start is just by crossing our right hand over. So then our right hand is in charge of the hi-hat. Our left hand is in charge of the snare drum. Our right foot is playing the bass drum. Our left foot is just holding the hi-hat closed for the time being. Eventually we'll lift and lower it and open and close the hi-hat a little bit, right? But for right now, this is our setup, right? So there's a few things you can check here. When you bring your hands up, you want to make sure that your feet haven't done anything weird or wandered, right? And then as you get your feet comfortable, you can kind of come back to your hands and make sure that your left hand should be in the same position it would be on a practice pad, right? So you can check that. Your right hand should be the same position it would be on a practice pad, just up and over a little bit, right? Okay? So you can mess around with that now that we've got our drum set assembled. We've got ourselves seated behind it. We've got our hands in the right place, our feet in the right place. In the next video, we'll get our hi-hat, our snare drum, and our bass drum kind of all working together, okay? So have fun with this, and I will see you next time.